Welcome to Constitution Week, a nationwide initiative by the Daughters of the American Revolution and the Children of the American Revolution to teach about the Constitution, the founding document of American democracy. My name is Perry Ground, Turtle Clan member of the Onondaga Nation, one of the original 5 nations that formed the Haudenosaunee, the union or confederacy of Native Americans that live all across upstate New York. 1,000 years ago, the 5 nations of the Haudenosaunee were constantly at war. But then a man who we call the Peacemaker brought to us the great law of peace, a very democratic form of government that allows our union to live peacefully and that we still follow right to this day. All this week we'll learn more about the Haudenosaunee Influence on the Constitution. You can follow along on social media like Instagram and Facebook, as well as check out the Chief Taughannock Chapter of the DAR's website for more information about all the great activities throughout Constitution Week.
Hello. As a member of the Ninian Chamberlain Society of NSCAR and on behalf of our Chief Taughannock Chapter of NSDAR, I'd like to thank you for taking a moment to learn about the Haudenosaunee Influences on American democracy. This project was brought to life by our committees to promote Constitution Week and American Indians. I hope you enjoyed learning about this subject as much as I did.
Before the Constitution was written and adopted, the United States was influenced by many ideas. Did the Haudenosaunee participate in those?
They did. The Haudenosaunee influenced people like Benjamin Franklin in the middle of the 1700s when they were first starting to come up with ideas to start a new country. Things like the Albany Plan of Union, written by Benjamin Franklin, were very much influenced and included ideas from the Great Law of Peace. In 1776 in Philadelphia, the Haudenosaunee were camped outside of Liberty Hall, advising the delegates as they wrote the Declaration of Independence, and that included ideas of democracy as well. People like Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, they all visited and learned from the Haudenosaunee, so were influenced by the ideas of democracy that they included in the Constitution and in the United States of America.
The Haudenosaunee only have one Grand Council, but the Constitution enacts a Senate and a House of Representatives. How are these similar?
Well, the Great Law of Peace gives the Haudenosaunee government rules to follow so that we have a way to operate, just like the Constitution does for the United States. In the Great Law, we have a 2-house or bicameral system, just like the Constitution. We have older brothers who discuss an issue first, that's the Mohawks and Senecas, and then they pass it over the fire to the younger brothers, the Cayugas and the Oneidas. And they discuss and debate back and forth until everyone comes to consensus. That's an idea the Founding Fathers didn't adopt from the Haudenosaunee. Also, we don't vote like they do in Congress. We come to consensus. And that was a real sticking point when the Founding Fathers were writing the Constitution, 1-house or 2-house system, but eventually the idea from the Great Law was the one that was adopted.
Did the Haudenosaunee have a type of a constitution before the United States formed?
We did. The Haudenosaunee have lived in what is now called New York State for thousands of years. And 1,000 years ago, a man called the Peacemaker joined us together under the Great Law of Peace. It was a type of forest constitution where we lived peacefully, what we say peace, power, and righteousness or justice among all the people. And our system of government was very democratic. And the power didn't rest only with the leaders. In our language, we call them hoyane. In English, you probably call them chiefs. But it rested with the people who were governed, just like in the Constitution.
The Constitution includes the Supreme Court and the judicial branch. Did the Haudenosaunee have anything like that?
We do, but not like the courts that many Americans think of, like criminal or civil or like traffic court. But we do have a type of Supreme Court, and that job was given to the women in our communities. Our clan mothers, the women in charge of our families, watch over the chiefs and the decisions they make to ensure that they follow the great law of peace. If they don't, that decision can be struck down. This was something that the Founding Fathers didn't include in the Constitution, that women could participate in government, until the 19th Amendment, when women were given the right to vote.
The leader of the Haudenosaunee is called TADODAHO. Is he like the president in the Constitution?
Not exactly. All of the Onondaga leaders serve as the executive branch, like we find in the Constitution. When a decision is made by the older and younger brothers, they pass it to the Onondagas, and they can either accept it, ratify it, or reject it, called a veto, and send it back to be decided on even more. TADODAHO was the most evil-minded person when the peacemaker joined the Five Nations together originally. But his mind was changed to peace, and he became the leader of all of the chiefs. But he is more like the Speaker of the House that we find in the Constitution. He sets the agenda, he calls the meetings, and he makes sure that our councils still function the way that they're supposed to.
Thank you.
How do people show the Haudenosaunee recognition for their ideas and their influence on the Constitution?
Today, many scholars study the influence that the Haudenosaunee had on American democracy. But when the Constitution was being written, John Rutledge, the leader of the Committee of Detail, the men that wrote the actual document, read passages from the Great Law of Peace to remind the writers of the democratic principles that came from the Haudenosaunee. Statesmen like Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and James Madison, they wrote extensively in their diaries about the Haudenosaunee and the Great Law. And then in 1987, the 100th Congress passed a concurrent resolution thanking the Haudenosaunee for their contributions to American democracy, stating that many of the democratic principles from the Haudenosaunee were included in the Constitution itself.
How do we know the Haudenosaunee influenced the Founding Fathers in the Constitution?
All those symbols that we could still see.
There are many writings and notes from meetings that the Haudenosaunee had with colonial leaders in the 1700s, and they acknowledge the influence the Haudenosaunee had on American democracy. Some terms like Grand Council and symbols like the Tree of Peace and the Eagle were proposed. Some were adopted, some weren't. But the most visible symbol we can still see is the bundle of arrows, which comes from the story of the peacemaker joining us together. He tied them together to show that we were stronger, joined in peace. And that symbol was adopted for the seal of the United States, which we can still see on the back of the $1 bill right to today.
We hope you enjoyed this program. We'd like to especially thank the Rio and Onondaga Turtle Clan storyteller and our friend and partner on this project, Perry Grant, as well as the History Center at Tompkins County. You can learn more about this project and other inspiring work happening here in the beautiful Finger Lakes by visiting thehistorycenter.net. I hope you enjoyed learning about this subject as much as I did.
On behalf of all of our partner projects, thanks for tuning in during Constitution Week. It's been really meaningful for us to be able to explore and learn more about the Haudenosaunee influence on our founding fathers. Without their modeling of a participatory democracy, who knows what America would look like today? thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to exploring more history with you. And finally, happy Constitution Week.